All right, welcome to another edition of Buc What You Heard. My name is Gene. You can reach me on Twitter at Super Heavyweight. Please feel free to tweet or give me your thoughts on what you're thinking right now. And I'm joined tonight by Peter Blake, host of the Sports Web, one of the best shows in the Bay Area. Bring your excitement, bring your passion. Just don't bring any nonsense. Did I get that right, Pete?
Yep, bring your passion, bring your excitement. Just don't bring any nonsense. 4 to 5 on WTN, 1340 AM every Saturday afternoon. And if you want to listen online, tantalk1340.com. So bring your passion, bring your excitement. It's not the other way around, but that's all right. I'm correcting here because
I appreciate that.
There's a lot of passion tonight that I have for the subject of free agency and for the Buccaneers because we've been talking off air, and I think you got some great points. And let me just get this out of the way right now. I'm sick and tired of hearing from the so-called talking heads and the analysts and guys like me and myself, okay, to say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not a Super Bowl team. They're not a playoff team. Why are they not a playoff team? Why are they not a Super Bowl team? And I think that I'm going to answer that question tonight.
Absolutely. And, this is a good segue into, what I was talking about earlier. Historically, I would say even the past decade, have the Bucs been a playoff team? Have the Bucs done what's needed to be done to put themselves in a position to be competitive? Every year, it's always, they'll be better next year. Every year, they take one step forward and end up taking two steps back. And I'm sorry. I understand what happened with Lovie Smith. It is what it is. We need to move on. But at the end of the day, you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they stand right now, with Doug Martin being a big question mark. And you have to ask yourself, if you compare yourself to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they drafted Jameis Winston to where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are right now, have they put themselves in a position to take the next step? And I ask you.
For me, it comes down to how much do you want to take that first step, and it comes down to money, mucho dinero, which the Buccaneers have. And the thing that made me depressed about a month ago was Jason Light coming out with his comments. It kind of was eerily similar to what Mark Dominic said in 2011. Now let's go back in time here. 2010, the Buccaneers were 10-6 team. They had Josh Freeman, 25-6. They looked like they were on the cusp of being a playoff team if they would have gone out in free agency and got some players to help them out, in my opinion, okay? And then they didn't do that, and they went 4-12, and Raheem Morris got fired. Well, now you have a team that had 6 wins last year that could possibly have 8 to 10 wins. I made no secret about this. I think this team was a 10-win team last year if they have just an average defense, if they get the penalty situation under control. What's the point in firing Lovie Smith if you're not going to go out there and spend money? And it just seemed like Jason Light about a month ago saying we're going to build in the draft. That's all we ever do. That's all we ever do. We build in the draft. That's what we do. We talk about the draft. Mark Dominic talk about the draft. The problem with talking about the draft is the fact that you have to hit on all those picks. So if you decide to ignore free agency, and ladies and gentlemen, free agency hasn't started yet, but I mean, just think about it. As a Bucs fan, I've been a Bucs fan, it seems like all my life since I was 8 years old. I'm 37 years old. And I can honestly say when I heard that a month ago, I felt like puking because you have to have both of those things. Why are the Bucs not a playoff team? Because they don't use free agency correctly. Why do they have to use free agency? Because they don't draft correctly. That's the reason why they're not a playoff team or a Super Bowl team. But I'm sick and tired of hearing about how the Bucs are not ready. When are they ready? It's like the Chicago freaking Cubs watching this team. It's always about next year, and I don't get it. They have a franchise quarterback. You have a running back that you can sign, which we'll get to in a moment. You have all this cap space. You have a high draft pick. You have a fan base right now that is hungry for this team to take the next step. And you come out with that on top of that to compound things. You raise ticket prices 20 to 25%, and you've won 3 games, a total of 3 games in 2 years at Raymond James Stadium. You better go out in free agency, and you better make your team better. And if you don't, then I don't know what the hell you're doing.
Right. And to go along with that, I look at if I were a season ticket holder, which I was at one time when I lived in Tampa, I was a season ticket holder. The one thing that I look at is this worth it? You made a great point. 3 wins in 2 years. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Now, as a season ticket holder, I'm getting ready to pay these new prices for, getting my tickets and getting everything set up. And I'll probably have to do it for somebody else just so I'm not going by myself. Now, let's look at the pluses here. You have Jameis Winston. You have Vincent Jackson. You have Mike Evans. Really, so that's something to get excited about. And you have a bunch of other players, role players like Cameron Brate, players like Austin Seferian-Jenkins, if he can come out. But let's look at the other side of this. You've got Gerald McCoy, who has not been healthy his whole career in Tampa, and he's played with a lot of injuries. You've got a new defensive coordinator. You fired your head coach. You have a new head coach. You've never seen this product on the field. How confident do you feel about going in and paying that kind of money for season tickets?
Not very confident at all, Gene, because here's the thing. Again, it goes back to the fact of you have a changing of the guard. But here's my thing. I think this team can be better this year if they go out in free agency, if they address those holes, if they re-sign Doug Martin, if they go after a defensive end. You can do that. That's why free agency is set up. Because the last 2 years, we know that the Buccaneers have focused on offense. But if you think that you're going to go into this draft and find another Quan Alexander, and it's certainly possible, but as you look at last year's draft with getting defensive ends, how many defensive ends that were drafted last year had double-digit sacks? Let me give you a clue. 0. There were no defensive ends that were drafted last year that had double-digit sacks. In fact, there hasn't been a defensive end that's been drafted by another team in the first round, let alone the draft, that's had double-digit sacks since Aldon Smith. Look how he turned out. That's beside the point. The fact of the matter is, if you have a guy like a Mario Williams, or you have a guy like a Tamba Ali, or Chris Long, or Charles Johnson today, you have to pounce. I don't want to hear you say that you're not going to spend money. I don't want to hear you say that we're going to build to the draft. I want to win now. And I always go back to the press conference when Lovie Smith got fired. And I think it's one of those things you have to pay attention to. When Jason Light makes his speech about how Lovie Smith didn't get it done, he says something that's interesting. He says that we asked the fan base. We didn't ask the fan base that we were going to rebuild, we were going to retool. We didn't tell them. We told them that we're going to win now. Win now. Nothing has changed, okay? You change coaches, you're still a general manager, you're still on the clock. If you don't win in another year or two, you're gone. That's how the Glazers work. You can't keep on putting this, you can't talk outside both your sides of your mouth. You can't say one thing and do another. Right. Free agency's been put in there for a point, and the point is to help your team out, fill those holes that you need to. And look, Denver Broncos, perfect example. Draft Von Miller, right? Takes them a couple years to develop. But what did they go out there and get on defense to help them get over the top? A DeMarcus Ware, an Aqib Talib. How many free agents have the Denver Broncos got on their team? Stop all this crap about we went after Michael Johnson, so now we can't go out and sign a defensive end. We can't sign a big name. Look, it happens. You have to get back on the bike again. You have to ride the bike again. You can't just stop riding the bike. You can't just ignore free agency. That's completely ridiculous.
How many free agents did the world champion Buccaneers have when they won it all? How many free agents?
17 on the offensive side of the ball alone. That year when John Gruden came. Keenan McCardell, Joe Jurevicius, Robin Oben, Ricky Dudley. The list goes on and on. Ken Dilger. Okay? Stop acting like, Tony Dungy just built this defense up. What you did, he built the defense up But to say he didn't go out in free agency and get players, I mean, Simeon Rice called and he wanted to know what the hell you were talking about. You can go out in a free agency and spend money and get players that can produce right away. You just have to do it smart. And I think that's one thing I took out of Jason Light's comments. He said he was going to do it strategically. He was going to do it smart. The thing that rubbed me the wrong way is going out and saying, well, we're not going to get a big name because it may affect the locker room, or we're not going to overpay, or we're not going to do this. We're going to build to the draft. Look, I didn't expect him to come out and say we're going to spend all this money, but I didn't also expect him to say, you know what, we're not going to address the free agency because we're scared. That's what it sounded like to me. That's what the comments sounded like to me. I don't know about you, but that's what it sounded, and it sounded like very reminiscent of 2011. And I could tell you how that turns out. Not good, because you put pressure on yourself. You have to nail every pick. If you draft a defensive player, defensive ends, they have to come in right away and produce. If you don't, you're back to square one again. If you draft a corner, he has to come in and play right away. All the players on your team have to be starters. And come on, let's get serious here. How many drafts? How many players that get drafted come in right away and start for the team? Not every player that gets drafted on the team comes in and starts right away. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
Doesn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head with this. We've agreed on this since day one. I know that free agency hasn't started,
right?
But if the way they're handling the Doug Martin situation is any indication of how it's going to go, how do you think players are looking at that? You've got a guy who came in, rededicated himself, busted his tail, and did what he did with this new offensive coordinator. Dirk Cutter owes a lot to Doug Martin as well, because I don't think Bobby Rainey could have done it. I don't think Charles Sims could have done it by themselves. They couldn't have done what Doug Martin was able to do. I've heard people, and let's talk about Doug Martin right now. This guy, you look at what he's done, and I would say over his career, 8 fumbles over his career.
Yeah.
Number one argument, Doug Martin had 5 fumbles last year. You know what? Adrian Peterson, in the same period of time as Doug Martin, has almost doubled. He had 12. So 12 fumbles versus Doug Martin's 8 fumbles? Come on. And let's be real here. I mean, fumbling that's not the thing. That's something that's coachable.
Right.
So you can use that as your excuse or whatever you want to. Now, secondly, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers they're over $50+ million over the cap. Okay?
Could be more.
Exactly. They even brought in another $8 million from last year. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, let's look at their free agency. Who are the potential free agents for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the next couple of years? Any big names that you can think of?
Not me. I can't think of anything. I mean, Mike Evans, a couple years, possibly. I don't think so. Jameis Winston, is he going to come up for a big contract? No. You got your big guys signed. You got Gerald McCoy. You got Levante David signed. Who else would you need to sign? That's what I don't understand about this whole situation. And I get it. They're trying to negotiate. And as fans and as analysts, we're looking into it and we're trying to stir things up. But we see the production on the field. He was the second leading rusher in the NFL last year. He was only one of 7 backs that rushed for 1,000 yards. And yet we're talking about what? What are we talking about here? I mean, let
me say this, because I know this. You'll appreciate this. Right. In your experience as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, going all the way back to the 80s, how many times have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taken care of their running back? How many times? It annoys me. Warwick
and I
Dunn,
get it.
I'm sorry. There comes a time though where you have to look at this player and say, I look at Doug Martin like this. How would Doug Martin help the New England Patriots? Immensely. If Doug Martin ended up with the Seattle Seahawks, would that improve their game?
Absolutely. It's their game. Marshawn Lynch is not there anymore. Retired, Doug Martin. Yeah. How much would Doug Martin improve the Dallas Cowboys? Can you imagine Doug Martin with a consistent running game and that great offensive line and Tony Romo healthy with Dez Bryant? You have to account for Doug Martin now. How much would it make Dallas better? How much would it make Tennessee better? I mean, ask Jameis Winston last year. How much did it make him better? I mean, stop with all this stuff. Keep
But
it
you want to
short
bring
and
it,
sweet and
yeah,
stupid.
yeah. It's me. You're selling for mediocrity.
Right.
You want to bring in. You want to bring in Matt Forte. You want to bring in a Chris Ivory. You want to bring in a Lamar Miller. I'm not taking anything away from those guys, but I tell you what, if they were producing, they would still be where they are right now.
Exactly. I mean, what did Lamar Miller have last year? 800 yards, 900 yards. You're talking about a 1,400-yard rusher, and I get it. He's younger, and he's faster, and it seems like he's better. The simple fact of the matter is, if he's younger, you're probably going to have to pay Miller more. So why pay Miller more? Why not just keep it in-house? Keep Doug Martin. And look, the Buccaneers very well may be doing that, and they may be negotiating whatever else. I just find it very disappointing that the deal hasn't gotten done with all this money under the cap. I mean, what are you wrangling over? What are you fighting over? And there was a report by Joe Bucs fan, who I like to read, and also by Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, saying in so many words what he heard, his ear to the street, is that Doug Martin would be a $4 million player a year. I can't believe that an NFL team would try to pay Doug Martin $4 million a year. I know that there's a team willing to overpay. I know that there's the Oakland Raiders and the Tennessee Titans and the Washington Redskins and
the Colts,
and the Dallas Cowboys, Colts, and even the Jacksonville Jaguars to a certain degree. They do have a young running back, but any team would probably most likely overpay for a Doug Martin. And look, that's the way free agency is. When you're a bad team, you have to overpay for players. Okay, right. Stop with we're going to save money. What are you saving money for? What did you save money for? You want to get better. You want to be a playoff team, because I'm tired of hearing about how we're going to rebuild and go to the draft. I mean, it just gets tiring. It's like you're a Cubs fan, or like we're Browns fans. You know, we're waiting for quarterback.
Basically.
And we got the damn quarterback. We got the most important position in the NFL, and Jameis Winston. Go out there in free agency, re-sign Doug Martin, get yourself a couple defensive ends, and be done with it. As my father would say, let's not make a big production out of this. He's a smart man, and they need to be smart men about this.
Yeah. And then you talk about, and this comes to the next argument that I've had with people is Doug Martin is injury prone. But they're going out and trying to re-sign Chris Conte. Now, when you think about injuries, I think about Chris Conte before I think about Doug Martin. Would you agree?
No, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And again, Doug Martin had 2 bad years because he was injured. I get that, okay? Before he got injured, he was leading the team in rushing. What did Bobby Rainey do? What did those running backs do? I mean, look at it from a baseball standpoint, okay? What's his WAR? What's his winners over replacement? Look at those guys that were on the team for Doug Martin. Look at Bobby Rainey. Look at I don't even know who the backup is besides Bobby Rainey.
They had Bobby Rainey and Mike James.
What did they do? What did they do in his absence? Nothing. So why are you trying to get rid of Doug Martin unless you want to go out there and draft? You want to create another hole and you want to use a premium draft pick to draft another running back in the 2nd or 3rd, 4th round? Or for this, and this is my main point here, Jason Light has basically said he cannot do any wrong. He drafted Charles Sims a couple years ago. He actually believes that Charles Sims is going to be the heir apparent to Doug Martin. I can go ahead and put Charles Sims in there to be the bell cow runner, draft another guy in the 3rd or 4th round, and be done with it. And it's happened before. And I don't have to tell you how this turned out. Mark Dominic did the same exact thing. You had a productive player in Michael Bennett. Do you remember how productive he was? Steve White knows. Steve White said it all along that Michael Bennett was the best defensive end on the line, and nobody listened. Everybody scoffed at him. What did he do for Seattle? But why did they get to that point? Because Mark Dominic believed that Daquan Bowers was ready to take the role. He believed that he could do no wrong because he drafted this player in the 2nd round, and let history show it absolutely was a failure beyond epic proportions. How many Bucs fans out there right now watching this broadcast would love to have Mr. Bennett back in the fold? How many?
Absolutely. Everybody.
Because that's your edge rusher, and you had him in-house. You had him in-house,
Exactly.
and you decided to let him go. And look, if I'm too passionate for you guys, turn it off, because I'm just telling you from a fan's perspective, this is the way it is. Glazers, are you listening? Jason Light, are you listening? People that listen to my show on WTAN 1340 AM on Saturday afternoons from 4 to 5, are you listening? Do the right thing by this fan base, or it will come back to haunt you in the end.
Absolutely. You're not putting butts in the seats with what you're doing right now. I'm sorry.
Right.
And let's kind of shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
I know we're getting ready for free agency. I mean, and before we get to that point, let me preface this by saying I've not been impressed with free agency over the past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I think there have been people that have hit home runs on it, but as a whole, the free agents that have come out and asked for the money that they've asked for, I haven't really seen the majority of winners out there.
No, I mean, and the Buccaneers haven't done a good job with free agency, getting Michael Johnson, getting an Evan Smith. I always go back to this point.
O'Neal Cousins. Please don't forget that guy.
Oh, no, and let's not forget Vernon, and let's not forget all these free agents. Josh McCown, you paid all this money, and that's probably why Lovie Smith lost his job. Well, what did you get rid of for all those free agents? Well, you cut cap. You got rid of one of the best corners in the league in Darrelle Revis, and now you're looking for a corner. Now you're looking for a defensive end. You had to go out in the draft and get a left tackle and Donovan Smith. You had to go out and get a guard because you didn't fill these positions correctly in free agency.
And let's before we go forward, let's talk about that for a minute. You have to go all the way back to John Gruden.
Mm-hmm.
When John Gruden was fired and Raheem Morris came in, the one constant, or the new GM, Mark Dominic, was in charge of the drafts. From everything that I've read, Raheem Morris had little input on the draft. He was more like I'd say more like a lame duck coach. I don't know. He's the guy that the fall guy for whatever.
Yes.
But you look at the moves that Mark Dominic made. And even previous to that, the general manager, I keep forgetting his name.
Bruce Allen.
Bruce Allen.
Yes.
Bruce Allen, horrible draft picks. If you look at his total body of work as, a Tampa Bay Buccaneers general manager, he did a horrible job in inspecting talent. He couldn't do it. So we had a revolving door. We were never able to build a foundation of players that you can build off of because they were all horrible picks, and you had to go ahead and waive them, and you had to hope that you recovered from that on the next draft. It just never happened. Now, from Bruce Allen, we get Mark Dominic. Mark Dominic had almost total control over who got picked, what draft picks were brought in.
Sure.
And you saw how that worked out.
Not good.
Brian Price, Daquan Bowers,
Adrian Claiborne.
Yeah. These are guys that they were here, but they were mediocre players. Mark Barron. And you can say what you want to about Mark Barron. I've never liked that pick. I wanted Luke Kuechly coming in here.
Sure.
And don't get me started on it. We'll say that for another time.
It was a crazy draft. Probably Kuechly was the best player out of that draft. But
and Sean King, the quarterback's coach for the USF Bulls now.
Congratulations, by the way, for him.
Yeah, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback.
Good guy.
He said, and we talked about this ad nauseum, the Buccaneers need to draft Luke Kuechly. Don't draft anybody else. Luke Kuechly is going to immediately make your team better.
Sure.
And sure enough, that's where he told me about him, and I got on the bandwagon. I saw his tape, and I'm like, this guy is playing like a man among boys at Boston College.
Yeah.
So, not to get off the subject, but for me, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just have not drafted right. And it's come, and this is where we have to give Jason Licht the benefit of the doubt
Sure.
because the last 2 drafts that he's been in, he's been fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compared to Bruce Allen and Mark Dominic combined, he's been fired.
Yeah.
And all I can do is hope that, in his infinite wisdom, this is going to continue. So, I will say that, but the reason the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in the sad state of affairs they're in is because of horrible draft picks over a decade. Yeah. Imagine it. Yeah. Try to fathom that in your mind. Over a decade of bad draft picks.
Including Josh Freeman, who, put this franchise back. I like Josh Freeman. I think, he was the quarterback of the future, the franchise. I don't know what happened off the field. On the field, I know that Shiano was here. He wasn't a Josh Freeman guy.
I strongly believe the right coach would have turned Josh Freeman around. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Josh Freeman, but I will say this. Ron Prince is your college quarterback, is your college coach. Dude is horrible. Josh Freeman played on pure talent alone. He really didn't have anybody to groom him or point him in the right direction. When he came to Tampa, multiple offensive coordinators, it just was not in his favor to be successful being a Tampa Bay Buccaneer because of all the changes that went on, the revolving door of offensive coordinators. And I'm not using that as an excuse, but I will say that had a big part to do with it. And then the coup d'etat, at the end of the day, that jerk, Greg Schiano. Oh, I don't want this guy here, blah, 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 playing mind games with people. And he totally took him out of his game.
Right.
And, to me, I thought there was potential. If you got a quarterback that throws for 4,000 plus yards, and then the next year you waive him, there's a problem. And it's not with the player.
And there's a main problem with that. There was a main problem with the organization. That's why they got Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith, give him credit, he did clean it up. There was no more MRSA. There was no more controversy. And congratulations to Josh Freeman getting the backup job with the Indianapolis Colts. Now he has a second chance here, and hopefully he fulfills it. But, when you miss on first-round picks and you miss constantly on late-round selections, and your whole basis is we're going to go into the draft, we're going to focus on the draft, we're going to build to the draft, and you miss on those picks and you decide not to go into free agency, then that's why you got what you got. And look, the Buccaneers tried. They went out to Vincent Jackson. He was a productive player. The left guard that they got, he didn't work out so well. Eric Wright got overpaid. You had to go out and get Darrelle Revis the next year. That cost yourself a first-round pick. So the Buccaneers have made mistake after mistake, and hopefully the last 2 years, this is a sign of things to come. But I cannot fathom Jason Licht going into this whole free agency period and saying basically, we're going to go and get bit players, guys that are backups to solidify our depth, and then go in and draft. You have to go out and get some premier players. You're going to have to spend money, and if you don't, then I don't know what you're doing. I just don't.
I'm right there with you. So when we look at this team, are they headed in the right direction? With the moves that they've made, are they headed in the right direction?
I mean, on the offensive standpoint, you would think bringing back your offensive coordinator, because you talked about Freeman and his consistency with offensive coordinators, you're going to have that consistency locked in with Jameis Winston. But getting rid of the second leading running back, a second leading rusher in the NFL last year, and Doug Martin is not a good start. Going out there and not helping your team out in free agency, getting the biggest need on this team, make no mistake about it, is that defensive end. They had 38 sacks last year. That's not going to get it done. You're going to have an edge rusher, and you don't have it. Jacques Smith is a nice player, and they may start him, but do I think at the end of the day he's a Mario Williams type or Chris Long type or even a JPP, even with one hand? Do I think he's that type of player? I'm not so sure. William Golston, a nice player. But again, you have all this money. Go out there. Get your defense right, because I truly believe this offense is good. You sign Doug Martin. Maybe you go out and get another wide receiver in a Travis Benjamin out of Cleveland. Okay, you help your offense. Your line's good. You got to fix this defense.
Now let's think about this for a minute. You talk about Doug Martin being the number 2 rusher in the NFL. Can you imagine if the defense was able to hold a lead? How many more times would Doug Martin have been able to touch the ball? If the defense is able to hold a lead, not playing from behind, how much better would Doug Martin have looked throughout last season?
Or how about this? How about this point? How about Lovie Smith or Dirk Cutter not taking Doug Martin out of the game for Charles Sims? Because there were times last year in the second half where Doug Martin would only get a couple carries. That is your bread and butter. That's what's making your offense go. That's what's making your offense balance. You take the ball out of his hands to give it to Charles Sims. I like Charles Sims. He can do a lot of things, and he's fast.
Absolutely.
But to me, he's a change of pace back. He's not a Doug Martin. He's not. So when you take the ball out of Martin's hands, or you decide to go and say, you know what, we're going to go out and get a Chris Ivory. Well, what's Chris Ivory? How many teams has he played for? You want to get, a Lamar Miller? You're going to have to overpay for him because he's so young. You're going to go into free agency, and you're going to have this thought process that running backs are a dime a dozen when you have one of the top ones in the NFL. Again, it doesn't make any sense to me, and I think Doug Martin is so important to this offense that he's going to help out that rookie quarterback like he did in Jameis Winston. He's going to help him out this year if you sign him. Get the deal done. I don't know why we're talking about this.
Yeah.
And again,
and like right now, this show should be we should be talking about free agency, who's possibly coming in, and we should be talking about the draft. We shouldn't be spending this much time talking about the running back, our running back situation.
Yeah.
Our running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the past 4 years, I would say, has been a luxury, with the exception of the injuries.
Sure.
It's been something that you don't go into the preseason worried about. You don't go into the draft or free agency worried about your running back because that's a non-factor. You're focused on other things. Now, like I said, we've been trying to get back on track, and we're talking about free agency now. I see that Arian Foster was cut, and this is a guy, to me, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and I just don't see the money that he's gotten. I just don't see where he's earned that money considering the injuries he has.
Sure.
There are some good defensive players out there that would definitely be upgrades over what Tampa had on the field last year. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, Mario Williams, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Get Mario Williams. Get him on that Jet Glazers. Don't let him go. Don't let him collect $200. Don't let him get out of that building. Sign that guy as fast as you can because, look, he's 31 years old, and he had, 4.5 or 5 sacks last year, but he was in the wrong defense. This guy is highly productive, 96 sacks in his career. I mean, he's the best defensive end in this market. And, look, if you have to overpay, then overpay. That's what you have to do. You're not a good team right now, but you could be a good team if you get a player like a Mario Williams. And to me, the key is that this defense needs to be fixed. And I think getting rid of Lovie Smith was the right move because, again, you keep the consistency with Dirk Cutter. But you have to fix this defense. And hiring a defensive coordinator is not going to do it. You have problems on this line. You have depth issues. You have problems at the cornerback situation. Maybe they feel like Werner and Banks. I'm fine with that if you go in and draft a Hargraves or Jalen Ramsey at 9, if you go out and get 2 defensive ends. But why just get 1 defensive end in free agency when you have us? Go get 2 defensive ends. Then you won't have to draft one with the number 9 pick. You can focus on other needs. Maybe the best player available. Maybe a cornerback. Maybe even an offensive tackle if you want to. It depends on what's on the board. But the key is, for me, looking at this free agency process, I'm going to be very cautious because, again, those comments rub me the wrong way, and the way they've handled the Martin situation, it seems like the Buccaneers are kind of sit on the sidelines, and I'm hoping they're not going to do that this year. But look, they did it last year. I mean,
but with these moves, does it feel like to you they're conceding the season already?
I mean, but conceding the season doesn't make any sense because Jason Light just came out and told you that the reason why Lovie Smith was fired in the first place is because he didn't produce. Well, doesn't the same thing go for Dirk Cutter? I mean, if you have a losing year, which, by the way, you're going to have one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, playing the NFC West and the AFC West.
Kansas City, Oakland, and Oakland is no slouch.
No, they're not.
Denver, and San Diego.
Yes.
Then you've got the Seahawks. You got the Arizona Cardinals, and you have the San Francisco 49ers,
Chip Kelly.
and you have the Rams again.
Sure.
And I promise you the Rams will be better. They're now in Los Angeles. They have to get butts in the seats.
Maybe
they
Peyton Manning. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, Peyton Manning might be their quarterback. Not that that's a good thing for them, but it's probably an upgrade over Case Keenum at this point. But you're exactly right. And all those teams have something in common. They are brutally physical, and they have defenses that will knock your face off. So if you're going to get rid of your second leading rusher, that's going to hurt your offense, okay? You've got major questions at the wide receiving position because you have Vincent Jackson, who's still coming off an injury, okay? And you have Louis Murphy, so you have to fill those holes. And then on top of it, your defense, if they decide to not go out and fill those needs and just go into the draft and draft defensive ends and hope and pray that they work out, which, by the way, if you do your research, most defensive ends that are drafted in the first round, it takes them at least 2 to 3 years to be a double-digit sack artist. So if you're going to go into this draft thinking that you're going to get a guy that's going to come out and start right away, I think you're fooling yourself. So to answer your question, looking at it right now, free agency is going to be an indication. If they sit on the sidelines and don't spend money and don't improve their team, I'm sorry to say it, guys, but this is a 7 or 8 win team. Just the way they are. I'm sorry. Yeah. I can't say, I went out there and I said they're a 10-win team, and I truly believe that. It wasn't the fans speaking in me. It was the fact of, looking at the schedule, one of the weakest schedules, getting a guy like a Jameis Winston. They're going to still have them, but we all know about second-year quarterbacks. Sometimes they do take a dive. They do, they have that sophomore slump. It just happens. Defensive coordinators catch on to their tendencies, and it catches up to them. So in saying that, if you basically concede the season after you raise the ticket prices and you only won 3 games in the last 2 years at home, then I think next year, if that happens this year, you can definitely put Dirk Cutter and Jason Light on the hot seat. Sorry. Yeah. It goes the way it is. Jason Light said it best. We did not ask our fans to watch us rebuild. And I don't think it was in so many words, but it was somewhat like that. We didn't ask them to watch a rebuilding effort. We asked them, and we told them that we're going to win now. Win now.
Right. So, and I keep coming back to this question. What are they doing to win now? What have they done in the offseason that's put them in a position that they're a better team than what they were last year? Well, what are they doing? I know we haven't hit free agency. Once again, I'll preface this again.
Sure.
We're talking about this team right now as it is.
Right.
And the fact that you're trying to bring Chris Conte back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a guy who could not stay healthy, he couldn't stay on the field, but you think highly enough of him to bring him back. Is that an improvement for this team?
I think Conte made some plays last year. I think he was also out of position, but I'm also thinking that, again, we go back to the statistic, which was Joe Bucks fan, another great article they had, and they talked to, I believe it was Greg Aiello, who said that Lovie Smith drafted 8 safeties in his days with the Chicago Bears. So I'm going to say the defense wasn't that bad last year, but I'm also not going to make the mistake and say this defense has all kinds of talent. They need to get talent. Chris Conte was okay. They need to improve in that situation at the safety position. They definitely need probably another cornerback, maybe 2 cornerbacks. And again, going back to the whole premise of this conversation, okay, what did the Denver Broncos do? The NFL is an emulation league. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, we're coming after your quarterback. No matter what we have in the secondary, we're going to put pressure on your quarterback. So we can put pressure on your quarterback. That takes the pressure off of our secondary. So why fight it? Why not go out, get 2 defensive ends, solidify your defense, see what Mike Smith has, and then let the rest play out.
And you saw glimpses of that in the Philadelphia Eagles game.
Mm-hmm.
You saw what happens when your front four are getting after the quarterback.
Sure.
It makes it virtually impossible to get those passes out. You saw what happened when Tampa was getting after Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan struggled. And
Sure.
I mean, they were close games, but Matt Ryan struggled in those games. Where in previous games he had quite a handle on things. So to me, I guess the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it remains to be seen what they're going to do. And this is kind of me. I'm trying not to vent. I'm trying to be as positive as possible.
It's hard.
But with the moves that the Bucs have made, and historically the moves that the Bucs have made, this is consistent with what we've seen throughout Buccaneer history. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I think there was a couple years where they spent some big money. Again, they spent it on Vincent Jackson and Eric Wright and the guard who his name keeps on escaping me, but he wasn't very good. I think he played 3 games here and he got a foot injury and he was done. But they really haven't had that, where they go and they spend money and it all works out. It seems like it's consistent. Like, okay, we're going to build to the draft, and then we stink for 3 years because we can't draft the right players, and it doesn't work out. So we go back in the free agency. We overpay guys that are not any good. Why can't you just have some type of balance? Draft well, go out there, get free agents that are going to come in right away and help your team out. And if they're big-name guys and you somewhat have to overpay, well, then why?
They have to fit in your system.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
That is a big thing.
Sure.
Tim Jennings. I'm thinking of players like Tim Jennings that came in. He had one good game against the Saints, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I just, for the life of me, I can't. I guess we have a new coach. We have a new defensive coordinator.
Sure.
So we kind of have to get our popcorn out and get ready because we've got a season coming up ahead, and we're going to see what we do.
Yeah.
So with that being said, what are your thoughts on the free agency, which starts on March 7th?
Well, again, I'm going to have cautious optimism because I'm not sure if the Buccaneers are going to be right there in the first day signing the big name. I'm not sure if they're going to go out there and sign Mario Williams on the first couple of days. I like to see it happen, but I have to be honest with you. I'm not sure if it will happen because of the Buccaneer history, because of the last couple of years, because of the Michael Johnson failed experiment, because they went out in Lovey's first year and they signed all these free agents and they turned out to be bums and not contributors. So right. I don't know if it's going to happen. Would I like to see some of that happen? Absolutely. So my thoughts on free agency, they have a lot of defensive ends out there right now. You add Charles Johnson to the mix, Mario Williams, JPP, Tombly Ali, Chris Long. You may be able to get a Chris Long or a JPP for cheap because, once again, they're coming off of an injury season, so there's a lot of questions about JPP, but I don't think so because I'll tell you why. Once again, it goes back to my point. The NFL is an emulation league. You just saw the Denver Broncos and what you can do with the pass rush. Don't you think they're going to put a premium on a edge pass rusher? Abso-friggin-lutely. So you may have to overpay, and I don't know if the Buccaneers are going to do that.
Yeah. And, to me, it's just like settling for mediocrity when you bring some of these guys in and you just don't know what you're going to get. Sure. How are they going to fit into the system? Are they going to contribute? Are they making this team better than what it was last year? At the end of the day, it's not about statistics anymore. It's about wins and losses.
Sure.
I don't care. I feel I'm happy. We had a rookie quarterback. He went over 4,000 yards passing, broke all these records, but I would have loved to have had more wins.
Sure.
I'd have loved to shell out my hard-earned money to go to a playoff game. I don't have a problem with that.
And going back to the point of, you see what happens when the defense allows a quarterback to sit in the pocket all day long. Look at Kirk Cousins. Look at an average quarterback like Case Keenum, who absolutely ate that Bucs defense for breakfast. And look at the greatness of Ryan Mallett, who was on 2 teams last year because he didn't have an alarm clock. He was LeGarrette Blount'ing it. Okay, he couldn't get up. I mean, that's what you got there with those type of players when you don't get pressure on the quarterback. So once
Absolutely.
again,
Look at Marcus Mariota. I mean, everybody had him pegged as the rookie of the year based on that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. And I
yes,
think his stats were so inflated by that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game that it made him look that much better than what he really was.
yeah, no pressure at all on Marcus Mariota. And then you see what happens when you get pressure on Marcus Mariota. He gets hurt. He got hurt twice a year last year. So again, you have Cam Newton in this division. He's not going anywhere, but you know his kryptonite, if you will, Mr. Superman himself. You hit him and you keep on hitting him. Drew Brees, you know what happened last year in the first game, don't necessarily know what happened in the second game. Excuse me. Matt Ryan, you hit him last year. You got pressure on him. If you're talking to me about a guy like Wallace Gilberry, you're going to go after him and sign him to the Buccaneers, and that's supposed to I don't know, give me hope that this defense is going to turn around. I'm sorry. I don't have any hope for that. To me, he's an average, maybe a good player.
And I'm sorry, Wallace Gilberry is a sore subject with me because Greg Schiano did not give this guy a chance to start. He had great preseasons, and he was a guy that would have contributed to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a while.
Right.
And the fact that Greg Schiano had his favorite people and didn't give this guy a chance, it's just another reason I dislike that guy. But I just have to throw that out there by any chance I get. So,
every chance you get, you hate Greg Schiano, and you know what? That's even a better point. You have one of the best defensive line coaches in Jay Hayes from the Cincinnati Bengals, and you have an opportunity for him to maybe make some of these players even better. Maybe make a Mario Williams better. Maybe make a Chris Long or a Charles Johnson that much better. Or if you bring in a veteran presence like a Mario Williams or a Charles Johnson, they can show guys like a Jacques Smith or a William Golston how it is to be a professional defensive end in the league. And that's significant. That's a significant point that people don't look at. People want to have all these rookies and everything like that, and it's all well and good, but you also have to have a mix of veterans. Going back to the Buccaneer team, we talked about it. 17 free agents that year alone on offense that John Gruden got. How much did it help that team out? They had a nice mix. And I get it. I'm not going to compare both of those teams because they're both different
but it was balanced. It was a balanced team.
Right. But do I think the Buccaneers could be a playoff team if they go into free agency and they address some of the holes on defense? Absolutely, I do. Do I think they could be a playoff team if they re-sign Doug Martin and they draft well? Absolutely, I do. It's going to be tough because it's a tough schedule, but anything is possible. But to sit on the sidelines, and again, free agency hasn't started yet, but I just believe to sit on the sidelines and say, you know what, we're just going to keep our money because we don't feel like this guy's worth it. We don't want to improve because we're conceding for next year. That's disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for you, now that the combine is over, I really wanted to ask you, is there one player that stood out over the rest, or are you of the mind that you trade your pick and you move down for more picks?
I'm not really sure what to think about this draft. It has a lot of defense. Okay, there's no offense.
It's not an offensive friendly. It's not an offense friendly.
Yeah, the quarterbacks are not very good. Carson Wentz, he's probably going to be a Cleveland Brown, and they're going to draft him because of need. It's going to take him a couple years to develop. Who knows? I may be wrong about that because Hugh Jackson is there. Jared Goff, Paxton Lynch, these guys are not guys you're going to write home about. They're not Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota, players like that. And saying that, with the defensive ends in this draft, you have a Joey Bosa who ran a slow 40 time. But you know what? Consequently, that 40 time is the same as J.J. Watt. How did J.J. Watt do? Pretty good. All right. He was a highly productive player at Ohio State. Maybe he drops to 9. I don't think so. I think a team may pick him up. Spence, who I know you're high on, from Eastern Kentucky, played at Ohio State, has some issues. He ran a slow 40 time, but we'll see here. I believe his pro day is tomorrow at Eastern Kentucky, so we'll see what his 40 time is. And you got to believe that the Buccaneers are looking at this. But do I see a player, Jalen Ramsey maybe a can't miss, Vernon Hargraves? I've seen his film. I like him. He's a man-to-man corner. Maybe he's there at 9. Maybe the Buccaneers like him too. Do I see an overwhelming talent where the Buccaneers have to get this guy? No, not at all. I don't. And there's a possibility they could trade out. I mean, one of these quarterbacks, because the NFL is so desperate to want a quarterback, they may have to trade up, and the Buccaneers may have to consider that. They could possibly do that because this defense is so deep with defensive end and defensive players. It's certainly possible. Absolutely possible.
Yep. And that just, that kind of brings me to my next point. You as a GM, where is that first pick going to go? Are you looking at Are you looking at the defensive line? Are you looking at an offensive tackle? Are you looking at a cornerback? Or are you looking for the best player available?
Well, it depends on what I do in free agency. If I'm the GM of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I told you what I do. I go after 2 defensive ends. I get Mario Williams. I get somebody else. Maybe again Charles Johnson. I think you can afford it. If you get both of those players, what's the need in drafting a defensive end at number 9? So I would go with a cornerback, maybe a Vernon Hargreaves, a Jalen Ramsey's on the board. Maybe go with him. If not, let's say there is a Ronnie Staley on the board from Notre Dame, and he's an offensive tackle, and you believe that DeMar Dotson and Godsler Cherilus are not the players that you want on this team, that you think are going forward are going to help your team out. Maybe you go with a Staley, or maybe you trade out. It depends on free agency. If I'm the GM, I go for 2 defensive ends. I'm going to draft a corner at number 9. It's going to be either Hargreaves or Ramsey. That's what I'm going with at number 9.
There you go. That makes perfect sense. Now,
I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. And I'm actually writing. So you would go with a Jalen Ramsey if he's available.
If he's there, absolutely, because I think he's probably a sure thing at this point. I mean, people are saying he's overrated because he didn't make many plays at bowl, because they didn't throw the ball to him. He played corner. He's
a shutdown corner.
I mean, I look at his measurables. What, you got a 41 vertical leap? I mean, he ran a 4.5. I mean, he's pretty talented player. He came from a winning program in Florida State. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Florida State fan, but I don't think you can go wrong. And saying Hargreaves, I think he's a great man-to-man corner. He ran a 4.5. People were worried about his speed. He's done a good job with kind of putting those critics to bed. I looked at how he played at Florida. He was a playmaker. He played against some of the top competition in the SEC. So why not try to add both of these players? One player is not on the board. The other player might be. If that player isn't on the board, both of them are on the board, then maybe consider again, going with a Ronnie Staley, an offensive tackle, best player available. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's an Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe we're talking about Doug Martin not being on this team, and they believe that Ezekiel Elliott is the number 9. I mean, crazier things have happened. Todd Gurley went high last year. You had Melvin Gordon go high last year, so maybe they put a premium on running back. I don't know at this point. But the more you do in free agency, you get these holes figured out, and you get these players in the fold, the less you may have to do in the drafts.
Right. I totally agree with you on that. You pretty much hit it spot on with. And, with me, I guess I'm still very one-dimensional. I really do believe the key to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is getting pressure on the quarterback consistently, not splash plays. I'm talking about throughout a game where you punish a quarterback to where he doesn't have the will to do it anymore. Sure. You think about Warren Sapp. How many plays did you see Warren Sapp sitting out?
I didn't see a lot of plays of him sitting out at all.
Or taking it easy on plays.
No.
I mean, I look at Denver's defense. As much as I despise Denver, and that's a whole nother subject, but that defense was scary.
Yeah.
The most underrated defense all season long. Didn't get a lot of press time until the game really mattered, and they performed like they were supposed to.
And just think about this for a minute, because you make a great point. But think about this point here. The Buccaneers with Tony Dungy, when they first built this defense up, they had Warren Sapp, and he didn't develop until a couple years later. We thought that he was going to be a premier player, but under Dungy's defense, he was unbelievable. But you drafted Reagan Upshaw. You drafted Marcus Jones as rookies. They didn't really work out that well, did they? You had Brad Culpepper. And then what happened to the defense? When did the defense transform? When you went out in free agency and you got a Simeon Rice, a proven pass rusher. That's when that defense took off. I think maybe the Buccaneers should maybe go back in their history books and maybe consider trying to go out in free agency this year and maybe recapture some of that history with getting a Mario Williams or Charles Johnson. What do you guys think? Seriously.
Hey, I'm right there with you, man. Whatever it's going to take to make this team better, whatever it's going to take to make this team a contender, I'm sick of seeing Carolina. I'm sick of seeing Carolina. It's hard to believe that the Carolina Panthers organization has been able to do what they've done, but they've stayed consistent. They've stayed true to form. They haven't gotten crazy with free agency. They've gone out and got some free agents that have helped them along.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, they still had to use free agency to some extent.
Sure.
And you saw what it got them. They have consistency. They know who their coaching staff is year in and year out. They weathered the storm of bad seasons, and it's paid dividends.
Sure.
For looking at what Ron Rivera has been able to do by keeping him there, and the philosophies in place, the culture has changed, and you look what you have. You have the Carolina Panthers. They've gone to the playoffs 3 years in a row. So to me, that speaks volumes, and I really hope that this organization can look at that and say, you know what, we may have a bad year here or whatever. We need to keep that consistency, because you can't keep having this carousel of coaches going out, because you know what, you get rid of this coach, next year we're going to be talking about another player that is getting ready to he's not getting his contract renewed, and he's going to be on his way out the door. It just happens like that. So Tampa, as an organization, really needs to get that consistency, just like you see in Carolina. But for me, fixing that defensive line first, and then working from the front to the back, as Tony Dungy said, that's going to give you a rock solid defense. Agreed. It's going to give you a defense that will give your second year quarterback a chance to make plays and put this team in a position to win, where it's not putting as much pressure on the defense. When everything is balanced, everything all works together.
Yeah, and you look at the Carolina Panthers, I mean, you have Charles Johnson, you have Star Lotulelei, you have K'Wan Short, they have Coney Ely, who played well in the Super Bowl. I think he's probably going to be their future defensive end. They went out and made a trade for Jared Allen. They built that defense up. Predominantly, a lot of their team was drafted, but again, they went out into free agency and picked up players like a Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn was a big player. Now, to make the Doug Martin argument, this was a team that let go of D'Angelo Williams. Now, D'Angelo Williams was a pretty good back, but he could never stay healthy. He was very productive for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had Jonathan Stewart. They had Mike Tolbert, another free agent, that helped them with the line. So is it possible to get rid of a running back that's average and fill them with two others? But Doug Martin, to me, is not an average running back. So talking about the Carolina Panthers, what's made them so good is the fact that they've hit on those draft picks. And if you don't hit on those draft picks and you don't go in the free agency, then you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or you're the Cleveland Browns, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you think? I mean, as we're looking at this right now, because we will come back to this particular video here.
Right.
What do you think? I mean, when you're looking at this team right now, do you see more than 7 wins based on who Tampa is going to be playing?
I mean, what they have right now, I'm saying 7, 8 wins, possibly. But it's a tough schedule. If they don't go on the free agency and fill some of these holes, like I've said numerous times on this broadcast, then I can't see them getting over that top. But who knows? Even if they do make some of those moves in free agency, they may not win more than 7 or 8 games because the schedule is so tough. But I'm saying right now, if you make a concerted effort to improve this defense, I believe that Mike Smith and Jay Hayes, you get the talent on this defense. I think the defense will be improved. I think it will maybe not top 10, but maybe a top 15 defense. And look, a top 15 defense with a top 10 offense, that's a playoff team. So it's definitely possible.
Absolutely.
But if you don't do anything and you're depending on guys in the draft, I don't get that, because it's basically you don't know. There's no guarantee that those players are going to come in right away. You better scout those players out well, and you better hope that they go in there and produce like you think they're going to, because if they don't, then you're back to square one next year, going into free agency and possibly filling some of the holes that you could have this year, or on some of the holes that you messed up on in the drafts.
Yeah. And once again, and you look at the Carolina Panthers, and they're not struggling for players for needs in the draft or free agency. They can casually pick the players that they need and fill these positions because they have that foundation built.
Sure.
And Tampa, that's where Tampa needs to be in order to be consistent, is have that foundation built.
And guys, the Carolina Panthers are only going to get better this year because they got that big wide receiver, that tall drink of water, that 6'5", 6'6" guy out of Florida State, Calvin Benjamin. He's coming back, and I know Cam Newton's going to have something to prove. So you better make sure that defense is top notch. And I think Mike Smith is a good coach. I think he did some good things with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think there was a little bit of a mixed bag with the Atlanta Falcons. But again, I don't care.
He didn't have the good level of talent.
But again, I don't care what kind of coaching you have. I don't care, what defensive scheme you're running. I don't care if you're running 3-4 looks. If you don't have the horses to run it, if you don't have the talent to run that defense, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
The last 2 years of the Tampa 2 here has been absolutely awful because he didn't have the guys that were picked by the coach that's fired, handpicked. And that's the reason why he's not here anymore, and that's the reason why that defense struggled.
Absolutely. So it looks like, wow, we've been here an hour already. Any parting thoughts for you as far as free agency, the draft, or any of this?
I just hope for Buccaneer fans' sake they don't get too excited. Have some cautious optimism at this point. Yes, the Buccaneers have a lot of money to spend. Let's watch this Doug Martin situation play out. And if it plays out to where the media is correct and he goes to somewhere else, then I think you've got to see what they're going to do. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, I was looking forward to it. And then the more it gets closer, I'm kind of dreading it because I don't want to be like this person that says this team is going to do this and this and this, and they absolutely do nothing. Who knows? We may be surprised. They may go out there, spend all kinds of money, get their team better, and this all may be a smokescreen. But I look at the way history is and what history shows, it looks like they may be sitting on the sideline.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
So we'll have to watch NFL Network together, and we'll have to see all the other teams spend money and overspend and get their team better and give their teams a chance to win, and we'll watch our team hopefully do something. If not, then I can't see this team getting any better. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate to be pessimistic, but I got to be realistic about this.
I think based on our history as fans going as far back as we do, and the moves that we've seen the Bucs make over the years, a lot of head scratchers.
Yeah.
A lot of head scratchers. And for me, it was exciting to see the Bucs hit on a quarterback after the length of time it's been that Tampa has had that rookie quarterback come in and be successful. I mean, that was a good feeling. Yeah. And, you just hope that this organization can build on that. And, they have to be looking at it. This is an investment because basically a football team is an investment. You want to get as many butts in the seats as you can. And you have to put the best product you can on the field. You have to.
And raising ticket prices doesn't help your fan base. Your fan base is excited. Again, they want to win. They're hungry for a winner. They're hungry for a team to be a playoff team. They got their quarterback. You raise ticket prices. Hey, raise ticket prices all you want to. Raise it every friggin' year. But do not make the mistake of acting like you're the greatest team on earth. Go out into free agency, spend money, get your team better, and then I'm okay with you raising the ticket prices. If not, it just shows me that you care about one thing, and that's the money in your pocket. I
would say wisely go out and spend money.
Sure, spend money wisely. I mean, that's the only way you can spend money these days is wisely. I mean, some of us spend more money than we should, and it's not on wise things, but at the time, it suffices us. It makes us happy.
Yeah.
But, talking about a football team, we know about it. But don't let that hinder you. I mean,
Yeah.
you messed up on Michael Johnson. Great. Get
You
back on
messed up
that
on
bike
O'Neal
again.
Cousins.
No, Cousins was never a player that you should have got in the first place. I mean, that's a Band-Aid. Evan Smith, they overpaid for him. He's a depth. He's not a starting center anymore. He's a nice guard. Maybe he's a left guard for Logan Mankins when he retires. But you don't stop going into free agency because you mess up. What you do is you get into that room with your scouts. You go and you look through that tape. You look at the players that are going to fit your system. You look at the players that are going to help your team right away.
There you go.
And you go and get them. And you make that decision. That is the way you spend money smart. That's the way to spend money smart. You go out, you scout, you look at the players that are going to help, and then you go from there.
Yeah. So, like I said, I can't wait for football season. This is probably the most annoying time of the year for me because of all the rumors. I think it's kind of nice that we have such a mediocre draft class compared to draft classes in the past. No more talk about Winston or Mariota. I think the playing field is so level right now that, you're not going to see a whole lot of the conflict. Sue versus McCoy, Evans over Manziel, or
kind of fun.
Yeah.
Ramsey and Hargraves, maybe we stir that up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could.
Yeah, I guess Buc What You Heard podcast. Let's stir it up a little bit. Ramsey versus Hargraves. We'll do conjunction with the Sports Web on Saturday afternoon on WTAN 1340 AM. Absolutely. I love this. I actually love this time of year because it's fun for me with sports radio, but it would be better if we're talking about the Buccaneers making some moves that we didn't necessarily expect or we did expect. How about the Bucs go out on the first day and sign Mario Williams to this giant contract, and then your fan base is like, okay, now we got an edge rusher.
Winning. They're committed to winning. Yeah,
they're committed to winning. Right. I don't know if it's going to happen though.
Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen. And like I said, we can look back on this particular show and say, oh, we were just talking about this team at this very moment. Yeah. And things could change next week. Exactly. We'll know for sure on Monday. We will know for sure.
It's all about the money. The money. Money. I do little Johnny Manziel for you.
Yeah, there you go.
You won't let me forget that, guys.
Hey, no, I have not brought that up. That's not my thing. It was a guy because he could have been good I believe if Johnny Manziel had truly taken the path that Jameis Winston did, and not bragging on Jameis Winston, but trying to get better at your craft, trying to be the best, trying to, do everything that you can that puts you in a position to be the starter, to be the leader, to end up being a Pro Bowler. I mean, Johnny Manziel only needed a subpar season to get the fans to vote him into the Pro Bowl. I mean, it was just he has not done himself a lot of favors with the moves that he's made.
No, not at all. And it brings me to my next point because I know you have a segment called Throw Your Yellow Flag. My yellow flag this week goes to Johnny Manziel. What are you doing out in a bar drinking champagne? Why are you hanging out with your friends that have cell phone cameras? Why are you listening to crappy music like Future and lying about it and saying that it's not a new song when everybody knows that nonsense that they hear on the radio from Future is new? Johnny Manziel, you get the yellow flag. On top of that, I'm going to throw another one, and this may hurt some people's feelings, but you know what? I really don't care. Peyton Manning, what are you doing? You just won your second Super Bowl. You're considering coming back. Why? What do you have to prove? I mean, the Super Bowl performance should tell you everything you need to know about Peyton Manning. He has seen his best days. Why would you want to come back for another year? Why would you want to be like Brett Favre and see you at some of your worst moments in NFL history? Please, Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the world, retire.
Well, there you go. For me, I guess mine would have to probably be the Dallas Cowboys and any other team in the NFL that is looking to bring Adam Pac-Man Jones to your team.
Oh, you mean the same team that brought Greg Hardy last year? You mean that team?
Absolutely. I guess a hard head makes for a soft tail because they should have learned with what happened with Greg Hardy. This guy has been in the NFL for how long? And he still hasn't got it right.
He's still
getting these.
Yes. At inopportune times. Inopportune times. Yes.
Exactly.
As Bengal fans.
Yeah, most definitely.
Ridiculous.
So for me, I'm going to give any team that's even entertaining the thought of bringing Adam Jones the yellow flag. Personal foul, stupidity, 15-yard penalty, automatic first down.
Exactly. I mean, if he comes down here, I mean, I know there's some people who are talking about we have a quarterback need, so let's go get Adam Pac-Man Jones. Oh, yeah, let's go get Adam Pac-Man Jones, who picks up penalties and is in the strip capital of the world. Genius.
Yeah.
Let's watch that guy go to Mons and try to kill somebody else. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's it for us tonight. And, hey, as usual, thank you for being on with me. I really appreciate it. Always enjoy your insight. And everybody, please, if you get a chance, check out his show. Peter, tell everybody how they can catch your show.
Yeah, bring your passion, bring your excitement. Just don't bring any nonsense. The Sports Web, the most entertaining sports talk show in the Tampa Bay area on WTAN 1340 AM. If you want to listen online, tantalk1340.com. Saturday afternoon from 4 to 5.
That's right. And his co-host, the general manager himself, Sean, the Sports Don.
Yes, some people call him the Con. He doesn't like that. He'll say it's Don to you, sir. So I'll go ahead and take him. But yes, he's the general manager, and he's going to be all about it on Saturday, talking about free agency. We're going to go through it. We're going to talk with Rick Brown, who's done this podcast also. He's great. We're going to get the latest about Doug Martin if the Buccaneers are looking to make some moves. But honestly, you'll know something is going on Monday and Tuesday when that legal tampering period takes place, and hopefully the Buccaneers are talking to some big free agents. If not, then we'll be talking about other teams making big moves.
There you go. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for checking out the show. Give us some likes, leave some comments. We'll definitely get those answered. And once again, thank you, and everybody have a good night.